Sometimes a person has internal dialogue of a nature that is unpleasant in some way. Just last night in the masterclass we had a gentleman who had a critical voice, a critical internal dialogue that caused bother to him, and so what I had him do is simply become aware, put himself back into a memory where the internal dialogue is running, in his case a critical internal dialogue, and I had him become aware of the tonality, the rhythm, the timbre, the actual volume, the tempo of the voice, and then becoming aware of the actual location. So where spatially does he hear that internal dialogue? Now keep in mind, a person, even though when we speak out loud our voice comes from our voice box, our mouth, our throat, interestingly, in terms of our internal dialogue, it could be anywhere, located anywhere in the body. In his case, the internal dialogue, the critical voice, was in his upper chest. So what I had him do was play with just moving that voice into different areas spatially, and to find out, as he shifted the voice around, was there any change in how he felt in terms of his overall state. And sure enough, he discovered that shifting the voice up, there was a significant reduction in the unpleasantness. In fact, the voice became more of a logical type of a voice. Now the next stage was to then invite him to discover the intention he had for talking to himself in that particular way. Now, interestingly, whenever we develop some sort of habit, in his case, he had a habit in how he spoke to himself. Once something's become automated, it tends to, something can run just outside of awareness. So people may no longer be, in his case, he was no longer running his internal dialogue in terms of his conscious volition. It was something that had become a habit. So discovering the intention, the original intent for talking to himself in that way, it was a positive intent, a very useful intent. He then made arrangements to develop other ways, alternative ways of fulfilling that intention. And then the voice spontaneously shifted up into his voice box. There was a change in his state, and to test this, I had him then consider the type of context where he used to speak to himself in a critical way. I had him put himself in a fantasy into that future situation, and sure enough, he had a new behaviour, a new way of speaking to himself. So that's just an example of how one person changed the way that they spoke to themselves. I mean, in his case, it was a critical voice. For other people, it could be a depressed voice, a miserable voice, it could, an ambitious voice, or any type of internal dialogue where the person has a consequence that they don't want to have. And so we have the ability as individuals to learn to bring these patterns, these processes back into consciousness, and to change the pattern so that we have new choices in how we communicate to ourselves.